is Phi Nguyen and I'm your host on Inside Vietnam.
This is a fantastic market because of the strength of the population.
A very high level of attractiveness. It makes sense for them to look at Vietnam.
Stabilised, there is an opportunity in Vietnam because it is an emerging market.
You know, there's still a huge amount of foreign investment coming in here, still a huge amount of interest in Vietnam.
Hello from Vietnam and welcome back to the show. My name is Phi Nguyen and I'm your host on Inside Vietnam. 2010 was considered a successful year for Vietnam in the area of tourism, where Vietnam received a record high of 5 million foreign visitors, far exceeding the set target of 4.2 million and about 28 million domestic visitors. The tourism industry accounts for 5% of the country's GDP and provided employment for 1.4 million people. According to the World Tourism Organization, Vietnam ranks fourth in terms of tourism growth in the world, with its tourist arrivals increasing by 20% year by year. In that context, I would like to share with you insights into one of the hottest investment sectors in Vietnam, tourism investment, with our guest speaker, Mr. Mark Townsend, Managing Director of CBRE Vietnam. Thank you very much, Mark, for being on the show with us today.
A pleasure.
Tourism investment has been a very hot topic lately because of the influx of tourists into the country and the development of the development of tourism in 2010 to be considered a very successful year.
A very successful year. Obviously, Vietnam is coming from a relatively low base compared to Thailand or Indonesia, which has had a very strong history of hotel investment, hotel development, second home market, resorts. Big kick up in number of new arrivals, which has come through over into the Tet period as well. The Vietnamese government must be very happy with that. Vietnam Airlines must be very happy. Still a lot of construction in the Phan Thiet, Quy Nhai area, Phu Quoc, and obviously Da Nang.
So tourism investment must be growing in the last 5 years, would you say?
Yes, we're tracking about 80 to 100 projects in this particular field, all the way down from Ha Long Bay, Lang Co, Hue, Da Nang, Phan Thiet, Quy Nhai, Ho Cham, Vung Tau, and Phu Quoc. Mainly Vietnamese money. Originally, 10 years ago, it would have all been foreign money. The big changes are that they're much more localized. Local developers are now buying the five-star hotels as they come up for sale.
Are you saying that the local developers are actually just Vietnamese companies looking to diversify their portfolio of investment at the moment?
I think there's two strong trends. One is a very positive and one I'm still yet to be convinced. One is diversification. The other is partly an ego thing as well. All the Thai tycoons, Indonesian tycoons, Filipino tycoons own five-star trophy hotels. It's something that the Europeans, the Arabs, the Japanese went through in the 70s and 80s. The airlines went through. JAL, Nikko, Lufthansa, all owned hotels and never got rid of them all now.
So are you seeing local developers using management companies at the moment?
Some of them are. Many of them are using Accor, Sheraton, IHG, and many of these smaller brands are coming across from Thailand. They're being incredibly successful in Phuket, in Samui, in Pattaya, Hua Hin, companies like Outrigger, Envision, Centara are all coming across to Vietnam now.
But most of them are still doing their own job and still managing the hotels themselves?
Some are. Quang An July manages a portfolio of about 9 hotels. Vincom, the big Vinpearl project. Vouten Phat manages service departments and a hotel. And of course, the biggest operator, or biggest two operators, are Saigon Tourist and Hanoi Tourist, where they have a portfolio of probably 100 properties, resorts, restaurants, parks.
Do you think that will be changed in the future?
Well, we're just beginning to see Saigon Tourist doing a big project with Accor, a Pullman hotel. So a renovation of the Majestic and a big new tower at the back of the Majestic, which we are branded as a Pullman. Obviously in Hanoi, the Metropole is also an Accor project. I think there's a push and a pull. Many Vietnamese companies now manage factories, office buildings, service departments, and for many of them, I think the next logical step is managing a hotel. It's quite a different asset.
It is, isn't it? It requires a lot of skills.
And it needs to be marketed 365 days a year. It's a bit like selling a newspaper. If your room isn't filled by 7 o'clock at night, the chances of you filling it are very, very small.
Have you seen any of those local developers fail to manage their properties?
No, we haven't seen any of them fail. We've seen some of the branding of that particular property may be reduced, but it's still very early days. For instance, the 2 big hotels in Dalat have just changed hands. And I think just because Accor isn't managing that hotel anymore doesn't mean to say that the quality or the wow of that wonderful hotel will be diminished in any way.
Why is it that there are more local developers nowadays than foreign developers in Vietnam?
Well, that would be the case in America, it would be the case in Mexico, it would be the case in Japan, and certainly would be the case in UK. Development is a very local game. You've got to know the contractors, you've got to know your market, you've got to know the demographics, the infrastructure, the legislation, and more importantly, the funding.
And the land title.
And the land title issues. Every country has its own land title issues. Vietnam is interesting. Thailand is more interesting. Foreigners can actually do more things here legally than they can do in Thailand. And we're moving away from 20, 30 to 50 years, and in some cases 75 years. But funding is the big problem here. With interest rates as high as they are, with inflation as high as they are, and the ability to get loans and US dollars when you want them, being a developer now is a very, very complicated affair. So it plays into the hands of the local developers, investors.
I've seen a lot of foreign funds, though, in Vietnam starting to get into the real estate game.
Seen a lot.
Yeah,
You see a lot.
I've seen.
You've seen a lot,
Yeah.
yes. The foreign funds were very, very active here,
Yeah.
2007 to 2009.
Yeah.
With the financial crisis hitting Vietnam relatively early in 2008, many of them pulled back. So not just the funds, but the developers did. So yes, there's the market's now dominated by the Malaysians with their big township projects, Gamuda, Ireka, SP Setia, Berjaya, and the Koreans, so Gangnam, GS, Daewon. Many of the smaller groups have pulled back.
So what happens to the properties when the foreign funds pull up?
Well, very often these projects didn't get built or didn't get started. Very, very few get left hanging. If they do, then the joint venture, one side either takes over the other, or a new investor comes in, or indeed, as you said, construction gets stopped. So if you go around District 7 now, you'll certainly see contractors taking a very long extended lunch break. Rarely do you get distress in Vietnam. You get anxiety, but you don't get distress. The Vietnamese developers grew up, it's in their DNA that inflation runs at between 8 and 10%. If you're from Singapore, inflation runs at between 2 and 4%. Interest rates are between 1 and 3% in Singapore. Here, they're rarely less than 15, between 10 and 15. So the Vietnamese developers know how to work within these parameters. The contractors know how to work within these parameters.
So the local developers are actually buying off the shares from the foreign funds?
As I said, there's no distress in Vietnam, no overt distress. You see very few for sale signs. It's not like in Australia or in the States where, in Australia, when there's a queue forming outside a house, there's a foreclosure sale going on. You'll never see that in Vietnam. People will do things below the radar screen. A lot of M&A activity overtly. The reality is there's even more below. It's like an iceberg.
I thought the tightening policy of the bank here in Vietnam has actually stopped local developers from actually investing into the area.
It's made it much, much more difficult. There won't be any fresh money, and obviously the banks have been asked to pull back. So it now becomes more and more of a challenge to pre-sell. So going back to hotels and resorts, you'll find that a lot of hotel developers are now working with an operator what brand will help me sell? So when Indochina worked with Hyatt 2 years ago, incredibly successful first mover advantage. Obviously now a developer must sell. If the banks are closing their mortgage window or their loan window or their construction loan window, then they'll need to sell more.
So which categories in the tourism investment have you seen increase in the last few years? Resorts, hotels, budget hotels, luxury hotels?
Right across the board. But the sustainable part of it, I think there are 9 hotels either under construction or about to start construction in District 1 now. And at the moment, we're running at a couple of thousand rooms and an occupancy, seasonal occupancy, maybe up as high as 85%, and the bad periods or the empty periods maybe down at 60%. But the 1, 2, and 3 star hotels run at a much, much higher occupancy. So there's been a trend by Ego to 5-star hotels, for the Brain to 2 and 3 star hotels. So we're seeing budget hotels, budget operators. We're seeing obviously groups like Liberty and A&M come through. We've seen the new city, the Ocean Group, Ocean Hospitality emerge. We've seen the Victoria hotels, again, the French investors selling out to the local investors. We've seen Indochina sell their 2 hotels in Dalat. We saw the Hilton change hands last year. But at the same time, groups like Vina are building their own hotels, and they'll go from 7 hotels probably to 15 hotels in the next 18 months. So a lot of changes. I think people trying to focus on budget, focus on 3 and 4 star, but at the same time, the Vietnamese tycoons coming in at the 5-star level. So a lot of change. It's like sea water mixing around.
So the trophy hotels you're talking about, are they just hotels downtown, or are they resorts in beach areas as well?
It's across the board, but typically downtown.
Typically downtown. What about the Da Nang area, the Da Nang coastline? I've seen so many of them going up.
Da Nang has a special, a number of special features. Obviously, there's the golf component, there's the international airport, there's the relatively cheap land compared to Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh. So as a gateway, as a second, third tier city, the dynamics are the expectation of intra-Asian tourists, particularly from mainland China.
So any shopping complexes going up in Da Nang as well, together with the...
Yes, Indochina are built one. Vina are building a very big one around the World Trade Center. And Dong Ah, PNJ are building one, Golden Square.
Are there anything else that can add to the equation? Not just the hotels and the resorts, because when you go to a destination, you would expect a lot more.
I think we're going to see theme parks. Obviously, we've got 2 golf courses there, 2 new golf courses. We'll see, there's a lot of activity in Hoi An. I think the local government is trying to work hard to keep what's good about what's completely unique about Hoi An. However, the weather isn't always great. There are going to be, for sure, some projects that don't get finished. Is it bucket and spade, like in southern Spain, around Benidorm, around Pattaya in Thailand? Or is it going to be boutique hotel, like we've seen, starting at the Nam Hai and Ocean Villas? So I'm yet to be 100% convinced that it's going to go one way or the other.